Today's podcast is supported by TRM. TRM enables compliance teams to accelerate business revenue and deliver actionable intelligence to regulatory and law enforcement stakeholders with leading attribution of severe risk categories. Request a free trial today at trmlabs.com. I'm Yaya Jata Fanusie. Scott Baucum grew up on a cotton farm in Lubbock, Texas, and went on to attend Texas A&M and then passed on his knowledge of agriculture as a high school teacher. So how did Scott Baucum apply his vast agricultural knowledge towards dismantling Chinese spies, plotting to steal biotech secrets from American companies? I learned about Scott after seeing him in an FBI short film called Made in Beijing, about the People's Republic of China's decades-long effort to infiltrate American tech companies in order to steal their proprietary data. Scott's official role at the Bayer U.S. company is Vice President of Special Compliance and Asset Protection, but his day-to-day focus is stopping the insider threat. Scott and I talked about what it's like being a target for economic espionage and how he has dealt with many cases of Chinese spies, so many that he serves as a strategic engagement advisor for the FBI. It's time to get designated with Scott Baucum on the Illicit Edge Network. Scott, tell us, where are you from and how did you get to Bayer?
I have to tell you, I have a very unconventional path in my career. It certainly was never by design. Kind of fascinating when somebody asks me that question. I grew up, first of all, in rural Texas. My dad farmed. I graduated from Texas A&M University, and I became a vocational agriculture teacher and an FFA advisor. Absolutely loved that job. And then I went to work after that as an agronomist and sales representative for Monsanto Company out in that same, geography. I lost my mind. I left there. I went to law school. I graduated law school. I practiced law. I hated that, what I was doing in that regard. And so I just told my wife, I said, I'm not living my life like this. And I went out, interviewed, and lo and behold, I ended up going back to work for Monsanto just at the moment in time when we launched biotechnology. So it was excellent timing for me. And then, of course, in 2017, Bayer AG acquired Monsanto Company. And I was at that time the global compliance officer. So I was reassigned from my role as director of business conduct into a role that focused on what I'm doing now, and that is vice president, special compliance and asset protection.
Well, Scott, you mentioned Bayer AG, but before we even get into the company, you used a term that I want to break down a little bit. Everyone knows what bio is and everyone knows what technology is, but practically, what is biotech?
Well, biotech is actually emerging science from the science of genetics into the science of biology in our case. Other people may do in the animal kingdom. We kind of exclusively work inside of the plant kingdom, and where you are bringing science in to where you can actually change what you have in biology, the DNA makeup of a plant, and you can make it more beneficial. You can incorporate some capabilities inside of DNA that otherwise you would, for example, have to use a pesticide for, or where the plant has long been exposed. It is just kind of the next step in designer plants, if you will.
And so then how does this fit into Bayer? Is that one of the things you do? Explain a little bit more.
Well, yeah. So Bayer AG is actually a global company that is made up of global-based subsidiaries, and we operate inside of three different sectors. We operate in the pharma sector, we operate in the consumer health and care sector, and then we operate inside of agriculture. We do those, offer those products all around the world, in reality, that is a life sciences company when you combine all of those things, because what you'll learn in biotechnology is that is kind of fundamentally all the same.
Hmm.
All of life, the genetic makeup would be made up of A's, T's, G's, and C's. It's a little bit like the binary code, zeros and ones. It's
Hmm.
just depending on how that's put together. So it's the same A's, T's, G's, and C's in the plant as it is in the human, but the combination of how those are put together determines how that's going to present phenotypically out in the world. So when you combine those sciences together, it creates a synergy there, if you will, that helps everybody working inside of science to do a little bit better, a little bit faster.
Well, in your role, you deal with insider threats, something that a lot of people don't know much about. So, can you explain to us exactly what is an insider threat?
Oh, you bet. Okay, and it's very important to understand that and distinguish that from maybe some other things there. First of all, and get started with this, I'd just like to clarify that I'm giving comments and opinions here today, not necessarily shared by my employer. I am also a strategic engagement advisor for the FBI. And asked to give talks like this in a lot of different areas, but I'm going to be expressing my opinions today. Well, first of all, insider threat. We are, as I explained, a science company. We invest about 2.5 billion euros a year into research and development. We do research and development on the front end of things. We actually invent brand new things, and that's usually in collaboration with other people in joint ventures and that kind of thing. Well, when you invest that heavily into something brand new, then that makes you very attractive to what we call economic aggression actors, or people that are in pursuit of that. We're investing heavily in order to develop that. There are others that will want to take a shortcut and try to get access to that without going through the long form. So
Hmm.
I'll distinguish insider threat from cyber threat. Generally, when I talk about this, a cyber threat is somebody on the outside of the organization trying to penetrate in and trying to get access to information from the outside of the company. But the insider threat is the person that comes to work for the company, is given access credentials, badges to get inside the building, and then computer and system log on in order to get on the system. Then they use that access then to go places that they're not authorized to go, to get into information that is not theirs to play around with. So I would distinguish those two things in that regard.
So, you're dealing with threats, in particular the insider threat. So, it seems like if I'm an employee and you're talking to me, something has gone wrong. What type of activities would cause you to be speaking to an employee?
Well, if you talk about it broadly, you've got disgruntled employees, and then you've got employees that are accessing information that they shouldn't get, right? Disgruntled employees have been known to do theft. They've been known to do sabotage because they're angry, and even all the way up to some type of physical reaction, like an active shooter or a physical threat of some kind of thing like that in the workplace. Far more frequent it would be in the accessing of information. Employees may go and do fraud. They may engage in embezzlement. It could be negligent action. They just don't know what they're doing, or it could be coerced. Somebody is enticing them to do something that they wouldn't otherwise do. But really, what we talk about, and the reason why we need an insider threat program, is to address the more serious matters under 18 U.S.C. sections 1832 and 31, which are industrial espionage and economic espionage. That is when people, very organized, intentionally send folks into a company with a shopping list to go after technology that is trade secret or proprietary, and then come out of the company with that. So you asked Yaya where I would get involved. Well, we have a process at our company where if there is a detection of some information that's leaving the company, there's a team of people that would detect that. They would actually verify that it's important enough to spend time on, and then they would go and interview the individual or somebody in that group to determine and confirm, hey, is this really important? If it's not important, then we may just re-educate that employee, send them through training again, something of that nature. Or
Mm.
we may go sit down with them. The team may go sit down with them and interview them and say, look, you did this, you're not supposed to. We need to go into your systems and your accounts to recover what you took and to make sure that you didn't forward it to some other place. And if that all goes swimmingly well, then I would only see it on a weekly report of sorts. But if they were to push back on it, I might go into the situation and interview them myself. Or if they were still not cooperative, then we may go to outside counsel. We would always encourage them to get an attorney, and because that works out better. And then if that doesn't work, then we file a civil suit for recovery of what we're doing.
So, Scott, when you are with them, if they're talking to you and it's been elevated at that level, what sort of things are you saying to them, and what are they saying back?
Well, yeah, so it's really good to get a grasp of all of this. The vast majority of people would make some excuse. They would feel embarrassed they got caught. They would say something that they thought was in their best interest. Oh, I didn't know. I just grabbed a bucket of files, or I grabbed a file folder. I didn't realize that that was in there. That's something that we hear pretty frequently. Some of the more concerning ones are, even with all the training that we've ever done, we still get employees that say, well, I was working here too, and that is my work product, and I should have some ownership interest in that as well. And we have to go through and remind them, when you came to work here, you signed this agreement that said the work product belongs to the company. We compensated you for that work. And you can't take this information with you when you go. So there you have people that feel some level of entitlement they don't have, and you've got to go in and deal with people in that regard, and then they will react differently. Right? Some
Mhm.
people will just simply say, "I'm sorry, knew I shouldn't have done it. I just did it. I was scared. I was laid off. I knew I was going to need to get another job. I thought this would help me in the next job." Anything from that all the way, to it was an accident. I didn't realize it. And then you get into people that react negatively. They will fight back, defend vigorously.
Mm.
Those are the ones that are really kind of sad, because we will follow them in the escalation of that. If we have to file a civil suit to get our stuff back, then it costs them a bunch of money, and it ends up aggravating them. And then the exit from the company becomes something that doesn't leave a good impression with them as they go out there. Ex-employees are always ambassadors to your company, and it's just very unfortunate when we get into a situation like that.
And Scott, I must say, you've dealt with quite a few situations. In fact, you came on our radar through a film the FBI put together called Made in Beijing, and it was largely about Chinese economic espionage. So, could you walk us through how economic espionage from China came on your radar?
Well, sure. Again, kind of accidentally, I didn't go looking for trouble. But in my role with Monsanto, I was head of global internal investigations. And included in that was, if we got an alert from our data loss protection technology that says, hey, Yaya has taken some information here. Every indication is it's important, and we need to go check on that. So we would investigate that the same as we would any whistleblower allegation. And then we would have a report in frequently, and we would escalate as that was necessary. But I'm going to tell you, in 2008, 2009, 10, 11, 12, in that time period, we began to notice that our total investigation load, the percentage of things we were investigating, was going up inside of the data protection category. Doesn't mean the others were coming down, but we did notice more frequency there. Simultaneously, we're rocking along, we're minding our own business. I get a telephone call from my corporate security team saying, you have a visitor here. The FBI is here and they want to talk to you.
Hmm.
Oh,
Wow.
I got a clear conscience, Yaya, but I couldn't imagine what that was.
Yeah.
And so I met with them, and very quickly, the first thing they say is, "Do you have a security clearance?" Well, no, I don't. Well, I need you to sign right here because we're going to tell you things that you can't disclose. It all seems very formal, right? It all seems very Tom Clancy. But in the course of doing that, they explained to me that they were investigating a case where an employee of a Chinese seed company was caught in a farmer's field in Iowa digging up the seeds that were planted in that field. This is ill advised. I think culturally, people really don't understand people in rural U.S. How they feel about private property, trespassing, and those kinds of things. But that nonetheless is what had happened. And they needed our help to develop the evidence on the case that they suspected that this was directed by the Chinese Communist Party. And we began to help them as they requested, help them understand the science so that they could understand how to put that evidence together. And that's where it became a team sport.
So it's a team sport. You all are working together. In that particular case, how did it come to an end?
Well, it really lasted. It had legs that just kind of extended, and all of that. So that particular case, we worked with them on it for really quite some time. They developed the evidence on that, and they developed it out of the Southern District of Iowa, I believe, federal court system. We worked with them. We got the evidence right. We proved up our trade secrets for them, and they got a plea agreement on the way to a conviction. That individual pled guilty and then served a prison sentence there for attempting to take that seed.
So you've dealt with more than one case like this, and before we get into, maybe the A to Z of how they have operated and how you've dealt with them, first of all, why would the Chinese Communist Party go after your secrets? What's the
Well,
value?
yeah, it's a very good question, and I would answer by saying we need to really think globally and culturally when we start asking questions like that. Okay, here in the United States, we are we're very tuned in to operating from a standpoint of capitalism, the concept of private property rights, rugged individualism, and being an entrepreneur. Right? That's really kind of a strong part of our culture here. But that is not necessarily true in every culture around the world. For example, in the People's Republic of China, there tends to be more of a mentality of community, of socialistic thinking about all for one and one for all kind of mentality. And so you have to start with the psychology of this first. But, when you just answer the question straight out, we invest $2.5 billion a year. Rarely would we ever invent anything inside of 1 year. It is a long process. A new biotechnology product can take as much as 10 years, over $100 million in order to develop it and get it there to the first commercialization. Well, if they can send somebody in phase 3, phase 4 of research, pick that up, then they can come to market almost simultaneously with us. They can bypass all of that experience, or all of that expense, and all of the time that it took to get there, and they can have it almost immediately by operating this espionage type of model.
So this model involves operatives, right? The folks doing the espionage. What's the caliber of the folks that have been sent to do this?
Well, I'll tell you, Yaya, that's a very dynamic question. Okay. What I can tell you is that the individuals that are sent from the PRC and the companies that are in the PRC, they are very sophisticated people. First of all, they're extremely smart. Some of the smartest people that I've ever come up, to talk with in my entire life. And then they have special training on how to approach this, how to do this without getting detected, how to get caught. And quite frankly and sadly, I feel like most of the time that their training and their ability is outpacing my ability to detect it and put a stop to it. And so let me just give you some examples in contrast.
Hmm.
The vast majority of data exfiltration is going to be an employee with no preconceived idea about what they're going to do with the data, but they feel compelled to take the data for one reason or another. We would see that because they would transfer that data to their personal email account through webmail connectivity in our company, or they would send it to upload it to a data cloud somewhere, or they would hit print, they would print it off and move along. Well, the sophisticated trained agents no longer really engage in that kind of thing. They have figured out that we are watching that. They do far more sophisticated things now. They can do things that I actually can't understand. My forensics people have to kind of explain it to me. But one of the simple things they'll do is they'll pull the information up on the screen. They'll take their personal phone out and they'll simply snap a picture on their personal phone. There's really very little that a company can do in that regard. And some of the technologies under development to try to address that are either extremely expensive or, not quite ready for prime time yet.
So, Scott, you've told us about a case where you actually caught the person, but tell us about a time when the person got away.
Well, I will tell you probably the most memorable case that I have ever had. You remember in the beginning, I said there's tentacles to this purple maze case, right? About 4 or 5 years later, I am interviewing another person where our data loss protection alerts signaled that there was some exfiltration of data. We put that individual in the chair. We were interviewing that person. I will tell you very quickly, it was apparent that this is the smartest person maybe I've ever spoken to in my life as far as intelligence, clearly smarter than me. And we're going through asking questions about the data that's disappeared. It was very long conversations, right? These are very long interviews because we've got a lot of things to ask about and we're trying to determine if we're telling the truth. We ask the open-ended questions, then we follow that up with impeachment if our information says that it's different than what the employee said. Well, along the way, the employee begins to telegraph a weakness, which is he thought more highly of himself than he ought. And so, with our training, we go in and we start playing off of that. And he really does get overly confident and he begins to say other things. And then he volunteers that he understands what our concern is, that it is the same thing as Mo Long, which is the name of the defendant in the Purple Maze case. And I
Hmm.
just asked him, I stopped and I said, "What do you know about that?" And he said to me, well, I knew Mo and I talked with him and interacted with him when I lived in Iowa. Well, immediately I understood what this was all about. And I said, "What did you interact with Mo about when you lived in Iowa?"
Hmm.
And he said, "Well, we talked about all kinds of things about he worked at a seed company and he wanted to improve what was going on there. And we talked about all kinds of things." And the look on his face was
Hmm.
such that I knew that he was toying around with me. Well, my spider senses were up at that point in time, and that combined with my propensity to lose my temper, I began to go after him pretty hard. And in the context of how red my face was, context of the fact that I'm leaning forward and talking with a higher volume and asking questions that get increasingly uncomfortable for him. It spooked him. He decided he wanted to leave the room. We can't keep him there. And FBI was collaborating with us on that. Everything was going fine until I blew it. And we didn't get everything that we needed. That individual went home in conversation with his wife. They decided to leave the country. Very soon, within days, they got on an airplane, they left, and they never came back. So, very hard lesson for me to learn, very humiliating for me to learn about be ready for anything. I was surprised by that, and it answered a very long standing question. All right. Well, in the course of all of that happening, that shook up a lot of people at the company. Many people knew this individual, they knew what had happened. They had lots of questions and they were very concerned for a number of different reasons, mainly not knowing what happened. And some even said, I didn't know if I was doing something wrong or not. But in the course of that, we had a very heads up HR manager who called our team and said, you know what? When you guys did that, there are a couple of employees here that I think kind of overreacted. It certainly was created a lot more anxiety with them than with others. They began to whisper with each other. They don't normally work together, but they started hanging out several times a day. So we turned our data loss protection monitoring onto those employees, and it was very apparent that they were downloading and printing lots of information that they should not have been doing. And I find out that there's lots of information being exfiltrated about 7:30 one morning. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, we had enough evidence and we had FBI there. We put them in a room, put them in a chair. We started asking questions of him. He got very uncomfortable. He then, at the end of that experience, he went home. 4 days later, he decided he was going to leave the country. And he was intercepted by U.S. Customs, TSA, and FBI at the airport on his way out of the country. Didn't have enough to arrest the individual at that point in time, but they were able to pull data sticks and micro drives off of this individual. We were able to look at it, and sure enough, we confirmed one of our most valuable trade secrets and other things were on that micro drive and on his laptop. So we felt like we were able to save the trade secret at that point in time. The individual then came back several months later. The FBI at that point in time was able to pick him up, arrested him, and we completed making the case on him. He also went to prison for 27 months. So It's amazing how these things just kind of connect together. People are very highly networked, even if it's just for social reasons. Conversations that we would normally have in the neighborhood with friends that are over, those things can tend to get way too substantive, and then you never know when you're sharing things you shouldn't with strangers.
TRM offers leading blockchain intelligence for AML compliance at financial institutions, crypto businesses, and regulatory organizations alike, with sanction support on 65 blockchains and coverage of more than 70 million digital assets. In a recent customer survey, 85% of users agree that TRM accelerates their work. 92% of users agree that TRM provides actionable intelligence, and 83% of users agree that TRM has provided intelligence they would not otherwise have. See for yourself why customers rave about TRM by requesting a free trial or demo at trmlabs.com.
Well, in terms of sharing things, I mean, you mentioned
a fine line, I think, the fine line between an interview and an interrogation. And it sounds
Right.
like you have to be able to do a little bit of both. But what I picked up is that it seems like you have technique. It seems like you have even a trade craft about how to interview someone. Any tips or anything you can share about how you interview someone when they are a suspect?
Well, obviously, yeah, I'm a little apprehensive about sharing mine because I just told you that I'm not very good at it, right? But I think read investigative training is certainly one that everyone knows out there. If they haven't been, they should consider. People that have experience. We had former detectives at PD that were on our crew, other investigators, federal agencies. We get together and work, hand in hand about that, teach each other good things. But I think just in general, you start out with open ended questions with somebody. You break the ice, you get to know them, you try to build a little bit of trust in that regard. And then you increase the detail and specificity of the cases to see if they're telling you the truth. Eventually, if there is something to hide there, they may have the tendency to start answering in ways that they think are in their best interest. That's not always the truth. And
Mhm.
when they don't tell you the truth, you ask them, "Are you sure that that's your answer to that question? You sure it didn't happen a different way?" They get suspicious. And then you show them that you have evidence to the contrary that they should have known. If
Mhm.
you do that a few times, most people are going to realize at that point that you know more than you've been letting on, and that it's in their best interest to come clean about it. So, everyone is going to have their approach to doing it. I learned an awful lot from former police department detectives, our federal agent retired, the people that had retired. We worked together, we taught each other. And then in the course of a long career practicing law, you pick these things up as well. That's just kind of the standard approach to doing those things, doing depositions as well.
Well, so a large company, though, that might be at risk for infiltration, for insider secrets being stolen, and inside having insider threats. What should they do to protect themselves?
I could go on for hours in answering that question. What should you do to protect yourself? I will say that there are a number of pretty good videos in there that talk about the details of it. But I want to tell you first, there is no substitute for prevention and deterrence. There are a lot of people in general that are exfiltrating things from a company. I think anybody in this business will say there's far more volume here than we want there to be. You really have to decide what you're going to pursue. You really only want to pursue that which could be damaging to your company, and you have to figure out how to sort that out. But nothing will substitute for preventing that information from being exfiltrated or deterring people from attempting to exfiltrate that. If you don't have prevention and deterrence established inside of your systems, I would say that in large part you're going to be ineffective and unproductive. And then I would say, second of all, you need to learn how to build that ideal cross function team inside of the company. You're going to need corporate security people with investigative skills. You are going to need IT security people with forensic skills. You're going to need people in the law, and you're going to need people in HR. And you're going to bring all of those folks together to make a team. And I will tell you, if you're going to bring a team like that together, it is essential that that team have a single goal document about what it is that they're supposed to be achieving. If you have a company that has compartmentalized functions, where
Hmm.
global security has their goals and they're going to be about doing that, and HR has their goals apart from that and they're going to do that, and IT security and law department, then I think you're not going to be where you want to be. You'll be ineffective, you'll be unproductive in what you're doing. When you put cross function teams together, you need to give them a common goal that needs to be formalized. They need to know that's what they have to deliver, and that will create a lot more opportunity for collaboration, teaming, commitment to one another, because then we're all in it together. If you fail, I fail. And it's that kind of dynamic that you want to create. You got to have the skill set, but then you've got to have everybody focused up on the same priority. That's where I would leave it, because there's all kinds of details about elements you have to have and all of that. I just can't stress enough. You don't get those first two things right, you don't win.
Well, so it's a team effort, but what about the small company? They may not have the resources of a Fortune 500 company.
Right. And I think that you've really hit on something there. But I will tell you, it might surprise you. I come in contact with smaller companies in the course of acquisition and investment. If my company wants to acquire another company or wants to invest in that company, then I'll do due diligence on that, and that's where I'll discover things. And I've actually looked at the data security of a very small organization, but the founder of that organization understood the importance of data security, and they had a fabulous data security system in place with compartmentalized data practices. They had access logs that were retained for a very long time. They had all of the elements there. They had frequent training telling people how important it was. And I was very impressed, but that's one in many. And I can tell you just one very important example. Years and years ago, we acquired a very important company. We spent over $100 million to acquire this company. We were very excited to win it because there were competitors trying to buy this company. We got that company. Our MBAs were so excited to go out into the market and announce that we were the winners, and they announced it right away. In our course of our integration, I interviewed the head of IT security there, and I said, "Okay, tell me about your IT security." And she said, "Well, Jim went down to Walmart about, I don't know, 3 months ago or something, and he bought the latest version of McAfee protection, and we installed that on our computers." And yeah, I was just stunned. I didn't know what to say in that regard. I said, "Really?" And of course, our IT security team came in and did the forensics there, mostly to do a baseline and find out where they were at and where we needed to build it up to. And what they discovered was the night we announced our acquisition, the night we announced, somebody penetrated into that system, took everything they had. They didn't even detect it. We didn't even detect it until weeks later when we were running the statistics. So I'm going to tell you right now, go to school on us. Don't ever let that happen. If you're an MBA, you hush your mouth until your IT security team can get in there and harden those systems before you go blabbing to the world that you've made a key or strategic acquisition. I can't stress it enough. It's very important. You harden those systems. Today, we don't announce anything until our IT security people goes in, hardens up, and make sure that we have the protections in place we need. Very, very expensive and hard and humbling lesson to learn. I hope that the listeners can learn that, go to school on it, and avoid that in their world.
Loose lips still sink ships. It still stands. Absolutely. Scott, before I let you go, I want to say that actually I think your auto reply email message is the best one that I've seen. I sent you an email to your corporate address, and I just got a reply saying one sentence: "I am retiring." And that was it. And I love that. That tells you all you need to know. So obviously you're working on transitioning out of your role. So what's next for Scott Baucum?
Well, after 33 years, I'm really proud of the work that we've done here. I think that the work I've done in this company is really important for the world. We feed people that would not otherwise eat or would not otherwise eat as well. We create medicines that help people to feel better and certainly that save lives. I think that you really can't spend the one career that you have in any better way. And I am thrilled and honored to have been able to serve in this company as long as what I did. But I think that successful retirement for me will be for me to be able to stay retired, not doing anything for, let's say, 60 days. If I can stay retired for 60 days without working, that will be a successful retirement for me. But I still got gas in the tank. I want to go out and I want to find a company, a very serious company with a very serious problem, and I want to bring a sustainable and cost-effective solution to that. That is what I do. Is I work with companies that recognize they've got a bad problem and want somebody to do something about it. I'm going to find an environment like that, go to work, and try to make another contribution if I can. And if I can't, if nobody wants me, then I'll go to my farm and I'll fish and I'll enjoy whatever time I have.
Wow. Well, either way, I'm sure you're on to a great, great sunset or great things up on your horizon. Um, Scott, is there anything? Yes, is there anything else that you want to share, or before I let you go?
Well, yeah, I would say if there's a closing message for everybody, I would have a message to congressmen, senators, those that are in the national security realm that are writing mitigation agreements like through CFIUS or through FIRMA. I realized that the president's memorandum came out last week. We're yet to see what changes might be, but I'm going to tell you right now, this thing that I mentioned in an earlier conversation with you, we are up against a formidable opponent. They are organized, they are centralized. Their government comes together and decides what needs to get done. Historically and increasingly, we have been at odds with one another. The private sector tends to battle against the public or government sector. The government sector has regulations. Then we've got the court system. None of these things are really, working hand in hand. We are up against a formidable foe who does. And I think the ability to bring the private sector experts into the room with the public sector national security experts and build the future together is the only way we're going to be able to achieve anything. And I think the first step is we have to admit that that's true. And we have to admit that we're going to have to get together now because it'll take us years to do anything about it. We need to build the details of our national economic defense together. I can't do it alone, and neither can my government colleagues. Together, we're going to be able to build something that actually works, that actually protects the future of the United States and their economic machine. We'll be able to build something that can protect our first place position in AI and analytics and all those other areas that are important foundational technologies. The longer it takes us to accept that, the longer it takes us to get everybody together in a meaningful way, then the more of our technology we're going to keep losing. So I do hope that somebody pays attention to that and decides that we need to get that done.
Thankfully, it seems as though the FBI has its very own bat phone with a direct line to Scott Baucum because, as our conversation shows, many of the tactics and methods employed by economic spies are the stuff of spy novels and movies that few of us could ever imagine in the real world. But Scott has seen these plot lines play out in the field, literally. So he knows they exist. And sometimes they exist within the ranks of the same companies being targeted. It's important for us to pay attention when he cautions that we must remember that there are forces out there, like those of the Chinese Communist Party, that want to steal the critical algorithms, formulas, and patents that companies like Bayer U.S. possess. And that means that these companies have targets on their backs. In order to protect themselves against theft, they must remain aware of and be on the lookout for external risks, all while keeping close attention to the possibility that the threats that are most dangerous are on the inside. I'm Yaya Jata Fanusie, and this is Designated on the Illicit Edge Network.